I've recently been reading with interest the work of psychologist Dr. Joseph Barber. Dr. Barber is an American psychotherapist with a particular interest in the use of hypnosis, and he's the principal author of the excellent book Hypnosis and Suggestion in the Treatment of Pain. Barber has a way of neatly and elegantly encapsulating those nuances and subtleties of hypnotherapeutic ideas and applications that many of us may already know, but can appreciate with a renewed understanding when we read his analysis of them. I strongly recommend that you read his work. He is a writer and pioneer of hypnosis who deserves more attention. One of the subjects he discusses that particularly engaged me was his discussion of hypnotizability, the notion that people have an innate capacity for experiencing hypnotic phenomena that is not particularly amenable to change, but that can be measured in experimental settings. Barber gives an informed overview of this concept, and he also points out that such restrictive notions, although perhaps useful for experimenters, have a limited value in clinical work. Barber certainly isn't the only person to think this. In my book, An Introduction to Hypnosis and Hypnotherapy, I quote the respected hypnosis authority Dr. Michael Yapko, who confirmed to me his view that formal hypnotic susceptibility tests have very limited utility because of their general inability to predict specific clinical outcomes. Dr. Yapko also pointed me in the direction of André Weitzenhofer's views. Weitzenhofer was the co-developer of perhaps the most famous hypnotizability scales in use, the Stanford Hypnotic Susceptibility Scales. Yet he observed that in normal clinical settings there is very little purpose in using such scales, and that they also unnecessarily consume clinical time in their administration. I very much agree with all of this for the reasons that I set out in my book. One particular point that Barber made, however, particularly resonated with me when he noted, quote, the variation in responsiveness, even in the same individual, on different occasions. Simply put, this means that just because someone manifests a certain hypnotic response on one or more occasions, there is no guarantee that they will manifest it on every occasion upon demand. This really should come as no surprise to the thinking therapist, as people are dynamic, changing, and capable of determining, consciously or unconsciously, how they feel it is appropriate to respond on different occasions, dependent upon the overall context. Of course, your fundamental interpretation of what it means when clients don't do exactly what you require when you require it, particularly if they have done so in the past, is going to shape how you make sense of such an occurrence. If you are wedded to the idea of resistance and are constantly filtering for evidence of clients trying to defy you and obstruct the therapeutic process, you will label your client resistant. Then it is likely you will butt heads with your client until they either do what you want them to do, reluctantly and with little long-term benefit, or they will disengage from therapy as they don't like your attitude. Justifiably, in my personal opinion. If, however, you take what I suggest as a more productive position that clients will do what it takes to get better, as long as the ecology and context permit it, you can respond in a more appreciative and curious manner. A beautiful example of this second approach is recounted by Overdurf and Silverthorne in their book Training Trances. They tell the story of a hypnosis demonstration that the late, great Milton Erickson was giving at a workshop in Philadelphia. The subject for the demonstration was a woman Erickson had worked with in the past, so he knew from experience that she was capable of manifesting the hypnotic phenomena he was seeking to elicit. Yet, here in the demonstration, it just wasn't happening. The woman had entered a light trance, but there was no evidence of her displaying the hypnotic phenomenon that Erickson was seeking to help her create. How did Erickson respond? Did he assume that she was being passive-aggressive? That she was trying to humiliate him in front of observers? That she was, wait for it, resistant? No, he did nothing of the sort. He appreciated that if this woman was capable of developing the type of hypnotic experience he was aiming for, and she had done so before, there must be a good reason, and probably a positive one, as to why she wasn't developing it there and then. He appreciated there was something in the ecology of the interaction, something in the context of the demonstration that he had not yet identified and safely incorporated. He wanted to know what it was. Even as the demonstration was progressing, Erickson noted that the woman was not wearing the engagement ring that she had worn the last time they had met, nor had it been replaced by a wedding ring. His intuition told him this might be the heart of the matter. Without overtly commenting on his suspicions, Erickson simply wrapped a small piece of paper round his ring finger a number of times, and then he gently allowed it to fall to the floor. Without any further comment on this, he said something like, "And now, moving along." The woman was soon enjoying a deeper trance and creating the hypnotic experiences that the demonstration was intended to produce. So what had been going on? Erickson had correctly intuited from the absence of the engagement ring that the woman had broken off her engagement, and that she might be concerned this would be revealed in front of the assembled group if she drifted further into hypnosis. Erickson created a simple, elegant and effective non-verbal method to communicate his understanding to her and let her know that the secret was safe with him and would not be brought up. Reassured by this, the woman was comfortable in more fully collaborating with the demonstration. It's interesting to identify the series of skills that Erickson had displayed. Firstly, he noticed the very obvious fact that the woman was not creating the hypnotic phenomenon sought. We might not particularly give him brownie points for this, as it was obvious to all. What Erickson then did, however, was to take the default position that he knew the woman could create the phenomena he was after, and that if she wasn't doing so, that was something to be respected and carefully explored. This position was fundamental to Erickson's whole ethos. Having settled into this position of respectful curiosity, while he may well have been in it already, he used his legendary sensory acuity to detect the fact that the engagement ring was no longer on the woman's finger, and this might mean something. He then second positioned the woman effectively, and perceived that she might not wish to have the issue of her engagement brought to light in public. Having formed this hypothesis, he then developed a subtle, non-verbal communication through his discreet pantomime with the paper ring to test his suspicions. The response of the woman in accessing a more productive trance was confirmation that he had been correct. You may be thinking that there are a number of therapies that engage in interpretation of clients' behavior, and you would be correct in thinking this. A big difference, however, in Erickson's behavior in this example is that he asked himself, what does this situation represent for this specific client? Not, how can I explain what is going on according to my pet theory? Furthermore, rather than making an assumption, deciding that it must be true and keeping it to himself, Erickson realized that his assumption was merely a hypothesis, and he tested it by communicating it to the only person in the world who could confirm or refute it, the client. In summary, I think that Barber reminds us of something important. The fact that a client's responses may well change from one session or context to the next, and we are arrogant if we assume that a client should perform on cue simply because they did so before. Erickson's example suggests they are wise to take a change in the client's responses as an important communication to be explored, and not dismissed as some form of unreasonable resistance. I think we will all do well to remember this.